I've been struggling with the emotions and thoughts that have been running through my mind lately, and I don't even know where to begin. It feels like every day has become a battle, and I'm at a breaking point. I've spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, trying to be the family member everyone could count on, but it's all come crashing down now. My family, my own flesh and blood, have turned against me, and I can't make sense of any of it. I honestly don't know why they hate me so much. Growing up, I was always the quieter one. My brother, on the other hand, was outgoing, loved by everyone, and the apple of my parents' eye. From the start, they seemed to favor him. No one ever really explained it to me, but it was clear from the way they treated him that he was always going to be the one who got the most attention, the most praise, and the most opportunities. Don't get me wrong, I love my brother, but the divide between us started long ago, even before we were adults. There was never a point in my life when I felt truly close to him. We were just two people who happened to grow up in the same house. I remember feeling distant even as a child, and as we got older, that distance grew. It wasn't like we fought or anything, but we just never connected in the way people expect siblings to. We didn't have shared interests, and we rarely spent time together. My brother always had his friends, and I had mine. I suppose I was used to being on my own, learning how to manage things without much support. But that's how it always was. I don't blame him for it, and I don't blame my parents either, at least not initially. However, as time passed, something shifted, and the growing tension between us began to show in more obvious ways. I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the line, I started feeling excluded, like I wasn't part of the family anymore. It wasn't one specific thing that made me feel this way. It was more of a gradual, constant feeling of being pushed aside, as if my presence was secondary. My brother became the center of everything, while I was left in the shadows, unseen and unheard. One of the key moments that solidified my feelings of being an outsider occurred when my parents started making more and more decisions without considering my feelings. My brother was always the one they'd talk about with the greatest concern, with the most pride. I remember feeling completely invisible to them. In a way, it wasn't even that they were directly treating me badly, it was more the fact that they never seemed to see me. They would ask about my brother's plans, his life, his future, but when it came to me, there was always this awkward silence, this void where any meaningful conversation should have been. I didn't realize it at the time, but the emotional weight of all this started to build up. It wore me down in ways I couldn't fully understand or articulate. I began feeling like I wasn't just the second choice, but like I was the one who didn't even matter. My parents' love for my brother was so overt, so palpable, that it made me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't enough. Fast forward to when I was an adult, and things had only gotten worse. It seemed like every move I made was scrutinized, compared to my brother's. If I made a mistake, it was highlighted. If he made a mistake, it was excused. They had a soft spot for him. No, it was more than that. It was as if he could do no wrong. The smallest things he did were celebrated, while I was always expected to do things the right way, whatever that meant. I tried to be understanding, tried to be patient, tried to be the bigger person, but the more I tried, the more I felt invisible, forgotten. The breaking point came a few months ago, when I had an incident with my family that just sent everything spiraling out of control. My brother had been in an accident. I don't want to go into the details, but suffice it to say that it was serious. I wasn't immediately told about it, which in itself felt wrong, but when I found out, my parents were already in full crisis mode, and my brother's wife, Karen, was handling everything as expected. I'll admit it right now. I didn't know how to react. I was shocked, but I didn't know what to do. The truth is, I wasn't emotionally prepared for it. After everything that had happened, after years of feeling second-rate, I had built up emotional walls. When I got the news, I didn't know how to show up the way they might have wanted me to. And maybe that was where the problems began. Maybe they expected more from me than I was able to give. Maybe they thought I should have been there, rushing to the hospital, offering all the support I could muster. But the truth is, I just couldn't do it. I didn't know how to express the grief, or the concern they thought I should feel. When I didn't react the way they had hoped, they began to accuse me of not caring, of being indifferent. And that accusation cut deeper than I could ever explain. I had tried to distance myself from them emotionally for years, yes, but that didn't mean I didn't care about my brother or that I wanted bad things to happen to him. But the emotional distance I had built to protect myself from the years of neglect and exclusion made it difficult for me to express anything, and that was something they couldn't understand. The phone call with my mother was a turning point. She had been upset with me for days after the accident. She believed I was supposed to drop everything and rush to the hospital, but I couldn't. I wasn't prepared for it, and I couldn't summon the emotions they expected. My mother called me repeatedly, each time demanding that I come to my brother's side. She accused me of not caring, of being selfish, of being indifferent. She said I should be there for the family, that it was my duty. But what she didn't understand was that I had been pushed out of the family long ago. My role had never been that of the emotional rock, the supportive sibling. And now that I wasn't conforming to their expectations, it felt like I was being punished. She didn't see the years of pain, the years of emotional distance that I had endured.
She didn't see the toll it had taken on me.
And that's when I realized that no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I wanted to move on and live my life, my family would never let me go. They needed me to be a certain way, to fill a certain role, and I was no longer willing to do that. It felt like I was trapped, unable to escape the demands of their toxic love, the love that only seemed to exist when I was fulfilling their expectations. I didn't know what to say anymore. Every time I spoke, it felt like I was digging myself deeper into a hole. There was no way out. They had already made up their minds about me, and no explanation would change it. All I wanted was to move on with my life, to leave behind the weight of their judgment, but it seemed like every time I tried to step forward, they pulled me back. But now, I feel like I'm at a crossroads. I don't want to be the person I've been for the past few years. The person who's constantly looking over his shoulder, constantly trying to please people who will never see me for who I truly am. I've given so much of myself, only to end up feeling empty and rejected. I just want to live for myself. I want to find peace. But I don't know how to let go of the people who were supposed to be my support, my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. So here I am, wondering if I'll ever be able to move on, if I'll ever be able to find a way to build a life without the weight of my past holding me back. I don't understand why they hate me, and I don't know how to make them see that I've never wanted anything but peace. I've never wished harm on them, but now, it feels like they've made it impossible for me to even think of them without bitterness. It's exhausting. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most, that I'm expected to carry all of this emotional weight on my own. It feels like I'm alone, like there's no one who truly understands what I've been through, what I'm still going through. My heart aches, but I don't know how to make it stop. I don't know how to make it better. It's been a few days since the last update, and I find myself in a whirlwind of emotions I can't seem to shake. The more time passes, the more I question my decisions, my reactions, and the people I used to call my family. Despite my efforts to shut them out and move forward with my life, they continue to haunt me, pushing me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about myself and them. But honestly, I don't know where to go from here. I feel so emotionally drained, and the more I try to distance myself from the chaos, the more it follows me. 2 days ago, I received a message from my mother. It was the first time she'd reached out since the altercation at the front yard. To be honest, I thought that blocking her on all platforms would be enough to give me some peace, but I was wrong. I never thought she would take it this far. She actually showed up at my house, unannounced and unwelcome, as though my boundaries meant nothing. I had blocked her for a reason, to stop the cycle of manipulation and emotional blackmail that had been a constant in my life for years. But she wasn't going to let it go that easily. When I returned home from work that day, I was already exhausted. It had been a long, mentally taxing day, and I had been looking forward to just sinking into the comfort of my own space. But as soon as I pulled into my driveway, I saw her sitting on the steps of my porch, her face pale and drawn as if she hadn't slept for days. There was a pit in my stomach. I knew what was coming. The same exhausting, guilt-inducing conversation she always seemed to initiate whenever things went south between us. I really didn't want to talk to her. I had nothing left to say. The anger and hurt I felt had built up so much that I couldn't even begin to find the words to express it. And yet, there she was, waiting for me. I thought about just getting back in my car and driving away, leaving her there to stew in her own guilt. But I couldn't. She had already seen me, and now she was watching me approach her. The power dynamic was in her hands, and I could feel my resolve weakening. I stood there for a few moments, taking in the sight of her. She looked so desperate, as if she were on the verge of collapse. But instead of feeling pity for her, all I could feel was exhaustion. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe some form of genuine remorse or acknowledgement of how deeply her actions had affected me, but instead, she greeted me with a forced smile and small talk that felt entirely out of place given the circumstances. We spoke about mundane things like the weather, the neighborhood, and other trivialities, as if we were strangers rather than mother and son. I couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. The emotions I had been holding back for so long finally came pouring out. The question I had been dying to ask, the one that had been festering in my mind for months, slipped out before I could stop myself. "Why have you been telling people lies about me?" I blurted out, my voice more bitter than I intended. Her eyes widened for a moment, and she tried to mask her discomfort with a nervous laugh. But it was too late. The words were already out. I couldn't stop now. I continued, "Why have you been spreading stories to make me look like the bad guy? I've never done anything to hurt this family. I've always kept my distance because you've made it clear that I'm not welcome, but I've never wished for anything bad to happen to anyone here. My voice cracked with frustration. You've made it impossible for me to move on, to live my life the way I want to, and I just don't understand why. The look in her eyes shifted. I could see the guilt creeping in, but it didn't last. Her defensive walls quickly went up. The self-righteous tone she took on next made my stomach turn. You're being ridiculous. Your father, and I just want to fix things, she said, almost dismissively. It was clear she wasn't really listening to me. She was just saying what she thought she needed to say in order to absolve herself of any responsibility. Her words were rehearsed, a script she'd been repeating over and over in her mind. And as she spoke, I felt my anger intensify. I'm not asking you to fix anything, I retorted sharply. I just want to be left alone. You've treated me like I don't matter my whole life, and now you're trying to make me feel guilty, because I'm not falling over myself to help my brother after all the pain you've caused me. The words were harsh, but they were true. I had carried so much resentment for so long, and finally, it was all coming out. At this point, her tone shifted. She went from trying to placate me to outright attacking me. You're acting like this is about you, she screamed. Your brother's in the hospital, and you can't even be bothered to show any real emotion. All you do is sit around and act like it doesn't affect you, but we all know better. That hit me like a ton of bricks.
I didn't know what to say.
She was twisting everything, making it sound like I was the villain for not reacting the way she expected me to. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Maybe I should just cut you out of my life, too, she spat, her face contorted in anger. After the way you've acted, I don't even know why we're still talking to you. Maybe it's time for you to realize that we don't need you. Her words felt like a slap to the face, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood there, stunned, as she continued to yell at me. Everything I had been holding in was finally spilling out, and I had no idea how to stop it. But I couldn't just stand there and let her keep berating me. I had to get out of there. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on my heel, opened the door to my house, and stepped inside, slamming the door behind me. I could still hear her yelling from outside, but I didn't care. She banged on the door, demanding that I listen to her, but I was done. I had reached my breaking point. I stood there in my living room, my heart pounding in my chest, my head spinning. After a few minutes, there was silence. I thought she had left. But then I heard her footsteps retreating and a low voice muttering curses under her breath.
She was gone for now.
But that wasn't the end of it. I knew it wouldn't be. I had no illusions about that. The next morning, I woke up to a series of missed calls. When I finally picked up, it was my father on the other end. The anger in his voice was unmistakable. He didn't even wait for me to say hello before launching into a tirade. You're an ungrateful child, he yelled, his voice full of venom. I've had it with you. Your brother's in the hospital, and you can't even bother to show up. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? I could feel my body go cold with rage. He didn't even ask how I was doing, or if I was coping with everything. It was all about him, as usual. All about the family, all about the image they wanted to project. I'm done with you, he continued. You're going to regret this. You've made your choice, and now we're done with you. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to tell him that I didn't care what he thought. But I stayed on the line, trying to keep my composure. You don't understand, I said softly. I'm not the one who made this choice. You did. You and Mom. You've treated me like I don't matter for years. Why do you think I stayed away? There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long, uncomfortable silence. You think you can just cut us off and walk away without consequences? You can't just abandon us, he finally said, his voice now low and full of a sad, desperate edge. I could feel my own frustration bubbling up again. It wasn't about consequences. It was about them continuing to hold power over me, continuing to manipulate me with guilt. But no more. I was done. I don't want to talk to you anymore, I said, my voice firm. I've heard enough. And, before he could respond, I hung up. I blocked his number, just like I had done with my mother. I knew it wouldn't stop them from trying to reach out. They would find another way, just like they always did. But for now, I needed peace. At this point, I couldn't help but wonder if they had lost their minds. The anger, the guilt-tripping, the constant demand for attention, it was too much. The more they pushed, the more I wanted to retreat into my own world and away from the toxicity of my family. I just wanted to move on. I wanted to find peace. But how could I, when they refused to let me go? How could I rebuild a life when the people who were supposed to support me were the ones holding me back? It's been months since I last heard from my parents, and the silence is a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I've kept to my new life, far from them, tucked away in the comforting chaos of work and my relationship with my girlfriend, who has been nothing but supportive throughout this entire ordeal. We've built something beautiful together, something that feels like real love, something untouched by the shadows of my past. But despite everything, a gnawing emptiness lingers. It's the kind of emptiness you don't know how to name. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's regret, or maybe it's the deep ache of realizing that no matter how far I run, no matter how many miles I put between myself and my family, I'll never escape what they've done to me. I'll never be able to forget the pain they caused, nor will I be able to fully heal from it. I told myself that I didn't need them, that I was better off without them. And in many ways, I believe that to be true. But there's still a part of me, a small, hidden part that I try not to acknowledge, that wants to believe in the possibility of family, of healing. I keep telling myself that one day, things might be different, that one day they might reach out with genuine remorse. But deep down, I know better. I know that even if they did, it wouldn't be enough. The damage is too deep. The years of neglect and emotional manipulation have left scars I can't undo, no matter how hard I try. Then one night, I received the call. I wasn't expecting it. I was sitting on the couch with my girlfriend, the TV playing softly in the background, when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the call sent a chill down my spine. It felt wrong. I answered hesitantly. Hellos. There was a long pause, followed by a shaky breath. Is this my name?
It was Karen, my sister-in-law.
Her voice trembled, thick with emotion. What's wrong? I asked, instantly on alert. My heart began to race, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. It's about my brother, she whispered. He's gone. He passed away. The words didn't make sense. I felt the world tilt beneath me. The room spun, and the noise in my head became deafening. I could barely comprehend what she was saying. It was as if the universe had pulled a rug out from under me. My brother. My estranged brother. The one I hadn't spoken to in years. The one whose accident I had heard of but never visited in the hospital. He was gone. Karen's voice continued in a blur, but I could hardly hear her. The shock was overwhelming, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to break down, to feel anything other than the cold numbness settling in my bones. I couldn't process it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. He fought so hard, but Karen's voice faltered.
He didn't make it. I'm so sorry.
We didn't know how to reach you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. 1,000 thoughts collided in my head. The years of estrangement, the unanswered messages, the guilt, the anger, everything. It all came rushing back like a tidal wave. My brother was gone, and I hadn't been there. I hadn't been there when he needed me most. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. It felt like the world had stopped moving. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, the weight of the news crushing me. My girlfriend, sensing something was wrong, turned to me, her eyes full of concern. But I couldn't speak. Words failed me. She didn't ask, understanding that I needed space. She simply held me, offering a silent comfort as I tried to process the enormity of the loss. For days, I couldn't bring myself to do anything. I avoided calling my parents, avoided reaching out to anyone, even though the guilt of my silence weighed heavily on me. I should have called. I should have visited him when I had the chance. I should have tried to make things right before it was too late. But I didn't. And now, nothing would bring him back. I couldn't help but think that maybe this was what my parents had wanted all along. For me to feel the emptiness, the isolation they had forced me into. Maybe this was their way of punishing me for the years of distance, for not coming to terms with the past. Maybe they were right, in some sick way. Maybe I deserved to feel this pain. The funeral came and went, and I couldn't bring myself to go. I couldn't face them, my parents, my relatives, the people who had always made me feel so small and insignificant. I knew that if I went, I would just be another target, another person to blame for not being the family member they expected me to be. The whole thing felt wrong, like a twisted farce. I stayed in Germany. I didn't go back. And while my girlfriend supported my decision to stay away, the guilt inside me only grew. I couldn't shake the thought of what my brother's final moments had been like, alone, suffering, with no one by his side to offer comfort. I think about it every day. Every night, when I close my eyes, I see his face. And every day, I tell myself I did the right thing, that cutting them off was the only way I could save myself from their emotional manipulation. But the truth is, I'm not sure anymore. I don't know if I'll ever be sure. My life is still going on here in Germany, but I can't ignore the fact that the family I once knew is forever lost to me. I can't help but wonder if things would have turned out differently if I had reached out sooner, if I had made the effort to be there when it mattered. But now it's too late. And that is a pain that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.